A fire starts on wood. Water goes on fire. Fire dies. March 10th, 1945, 12:15 a.m., Shitamachi District, Tokyo. Yoshiko Hashimoto pressed her baby against her chest. The sirens had stopped. Most of Tokyo had stopped listening to them anyway. Too many false alarms, too many nights of nothing but distant engines overhead. This time was different. Through her paper and wood walls she heard it. Not the whistle of falling bombs. A sound like rain. Heavy rain. Then the first explosion. Not outward, but upward. A geyser of fire that punched through her neighbor's roof and spread horizontally across the eaves. Then another, another, another. The rain was fire. What Yoshiko couldn't know, clutching her child in the darkness, she was experiencing the most lethal air attack in human history, not because of its explosive power, because of what stuck to everything it touched. February 14th, 1942, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Professor Louis Fieser stood in the basement laboratory of Harvard's Converse Chemistry Building, staring at a beaker of translucent gel. 39 years old, respected chemist, specialist in organic compounds. He'd been summoned to solve a problem for the National Defense Research Committee. The problem: rubber was gone. Japan had seized the plantations in Malaya, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. The Allies' early incendiary weapons, gasoline mixed with rubber, were now impossible to manufacture. Fieser needed an alternative, something that would thicken gasoline without rubber. Make it stick. Make it burn longer, hotter, impossible to extinguish. He tried combinations: naphthenic acid, palmitic acid, aluminum salts. When he mixed them with gasoline, the result looked almost innocent, a clear jelly, slightly thicker than honey. He called it napalm. February 14th, 1942, Valentine's Day, the day a Harvard professor invented a gel that would kill more Japanese civilians than both atomic bombs combined. July 4th, 1942, Harvard soccer field, Independence Day. Fieser carried 45 pounds of his napalm gel to the Harvard College soccer field near the business school, Cambridge Fire Department on standby, university officials watching from a safe distance, tennis players on nearby courts pausing mid-serve. He'd built a shallow pool, filled it with water. The test: could napalm burn even when surrounded by the very thing that should extinguish it? He pressed the ignition button. White phosphorus detonated first. Brilliant flash, chemical heat. Then the napalm caught. Flaming chunks erupted from the pool, arcing through the July air. They splashed into the water. They kept burning. On the surface, under the surface. The gel clung to itself, excluded water, sustained its own combustion at temperatures reaching 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Tennis players screamed at the explosion's report. But Fieser watched the flames dancing on water, a smile spreading across his face. He'd done it, created something that violated every instinct about fire, something that water couldn't kill. When we were developing napalm, he said later, we never thought of any anti-personnel use. We were thinking in terms of wooden structures, factories. He was right about the wooden structures, wrong about everything else. March 1943. Dugway, Proving Ground, Utah. 90 miles southwest of Salt Lake City, U.S. Army engineers constructed two ghost towns in the desert. They called them Japanese Village and German Village. Perfect replicas. Japanese structures, wood frames, paper screens, tatami mats, sliding doors. The kind of construction that defined Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, cities where entire neighborhoods were essentially kindling wrapped in rice paper. The engineers needed to know how many bombs would it take to destroy a Japanese city. They tested thermite incendiaries first. Burns at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, spectacular but localized. The fire consumed itself too quickly, didn't spread well. Then they tried the M69. The AN-M69 was elegant in its brutality, a hexagonal steel pipe, 3 inches in diameter, 20 inches long, 6 pounds, filled with napalm, 38 of them packed into an E-46 cluster bomb. The cluster fell from 2,000 feet, broke apart. Each M69 released a small cotton streamer, just enough to orient it nose down. Upon impact, a 3 to 5 second delay. Then a small black powder charge explosively propelled burning napalm up to 100 feet in multiple directions. If unobstructed, the flaming gel traveled 300 feet horizontally. When it hit a surface, it smeared into a mass of flames 6 to 10 feet high. And it stuck. To wood, to paper, to cloth, to skin. Against the replica Japanese houses, the M69 performed beyond expectations. Each bomblet started fires that jumped from structure to structure. The paper walls accelerated the spread. The wood construction provided endless fuel. Within minutes, the test village was an inferno. A single B-29 superfortress could carry 40 cluster bombs in its bay. That's 1,120 individual M69 bomblets per aircraft. The engineers calculated it would take approximately 125 tons per square mile to completely burn out a Japanese urban area. They nicknamed the M69 Tokyo Calling Card. The Japanese had no idea what was coming. November 24, 1944, first raid on Tokyo. The B-29s came from China, high-altitude precision bombing, targeting the Musashino aircraft engine plant. Of the 111 aircraft that reached Japan, only 24 actually bombed Tokyo. Jet stream winds at 35,000 feet, sometimes exceeding 250 miles per hour, scattered their payloads harmlessly across the countryside and into the ocean. The raid accomplished virtually nothing, but it taught Major General Curtis LeMay everything he needed to know. LeMay, 38 years old, had taken command of Vyriapin Bomber Command in January 1945. He'd studied the reports from European bombing campaigns, the data from Dugway, the intelligence on Japanese cities. He understood what others hadn't grasped. Precision bombing was the wrong strategy. Japan's industrial production wasn't concentrated in massive factories. It was distributed across thousands of small cottage workshops embedded in residential neighborhoods. Workers produced aircraft parts in their homes. Critical war materials were manufactured in buildings indistinguishable from civilian housing. And 98% of Tokyo's structures were wood and paper. LeMay made a decision that would define his legacy and haunt him for the rest of his life. He would abandon precision bombing, abandon high-altitude tactics, abandon daytime raids. Instead, nighttime attacks at 5,000 feet. Maximum bomb loads of incendiaries, no formation flying, individual aircraft timing. And because Japanese night fighters and anti-aircraft capabilities were weak, he'd strip most defensive armament from the B-29s to save weight. More weight meant more bombs. More bombs meant more fire. General Hap Arnold, Army Air Force's commanding general, needed results. The war was dragging. An invasion of Japan would cost hundreds of thousands of American lives. Arnold needed the B-29 to prove its worth, to break Japan without invasion. LeMay didn't ask permission for his new tactics. He briefed only General Loris Norstad, Arnold's chief of staff. The target, Shitamachi District, Tokyo, 4 miles by 3 miles, approximately 750,000 people, dense concentration of cottage industries, and, unavoidably, families, children, the elderly. LeMay chose it anyway. Killing Japanese didn't bother me very much at that time, he said later. It was getting the war over that bothered me. March 9, 1945, 5:35 p.m., North Field, Guam. The first B-29 lifted off as the sun touched the Pacific horizon. Every 50 seconds another followed, from Guam, from Saipan, from Tinian. 325 superfortresses, each carrying 40 E-46 cluster bombs. That's 1,120 M69 napalm bomblets per aircraft. Total payload, 1,765 tons of incendiaries. The crews had been briefed. Low altitude, no formation, individual timing. Pathfinders would mark the target area with a flaming X. Follow-on aircraft would simply aim for the fire. Most crews were confused, stripping the defensive guns, flying low over Tokyo at night. It felt like suicide. Some crews refused to remove their ammunition. LeMay let it go. What mattered was the fire. The B-29s droned northwest across the Pacific. Inside the aircraft, flight engineers monitored the temperamental Wright R-3350 engines, notorious for overheating, for catching fire, for failing at the worst moments. Navigators calculated wind drift. Bombardiers prepared their equipment. Few talked about what they were about to do, about the people sleeping below their flight path. That silence was its own answer. March 10, 1945, 12:08 a.m., over Tokyo. The Pathfinder B-29s arrived first. Coming from opposite directions, they dropped their M69 clusters in a precise pattern. The napalm ignited instantly, brilliant orange against the black city below. The flames formed a perfect X, marking the center of Shitamachi District. The X was visible from 100 miles away. Behind the Pathfinders, 279 more B-29s streamed toward Tokyo. No formation, just individual aircraft, one after another, released their clusters at 5,000 feet. At 2,000 feet, each cluster broke apart. 38 M69s per cluster, small cotton streamers orienting them downward. Then impact. 3-second delay, explosion. Burning napalm expelled at high velocity, spreading in every direction. Yoshiko Hashimoto, clutching her baby, heard the sound like rain. And if this moment, this weapon that water couldn't defeat, this fire that stuck to everything, shocks you as much as it shocked the people of Tokyo that night, hit that like button. Your engagement tells YouTube that real history, the kind they don't always teach, matters. Now back to that night. 12:15 a.m., Shitamachi District. The first fire started in Asakusa Ward, then Honjo, then Fukagawa. Individual blazes, dozens, then hundreds, ignited by the M69's explosive dispersal of burning gel. The napalm found paper screens, tatami mats, wooden roof supports, cotton futons. Each surface it touched became fuel. Within 15 minutes, individual fires began merging. Tokyo's 6,000 professional firefighters responded immediately. They were equipped for conventional fires. They had no training, no equipment, no concept for this. Water on napalm didn't extinguish it. The gel floated, still burning. The firefighters tried smothering techniques. The napalm's combustion excluded oxygen so efficiently that even traditional smothering failed, and the fires kept merging. By 12:30 a.m., meteorological conditions created what the Japanese would later call the Night of the Black Snow. Strong winds, 17 to 28 miles per hour, fanned the flames horizontally. The heat from hundreds of burning structures created massive updrafts. The updrafts sucked in more oxygen. The oxygen fed the flames. The flames created more heat. A feedback loop of combustion. Not quite a firestorm. The wind was too directional, too natural, but something just as deadly. A massive conflagration that moved through Shitamachi like a living thing, consuming everything combustible, generating temperatures that reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit at ground level. Metal melted, canals boiled, people and buildings burst spontaneously into flames from radiant heat alone, before the fire even reached them. Yoshiko ran. 12:45 a.m., the streets of Shitamachi. Yoshiko Hashimoto pressed through the crowd, her baby against her chest, her mother beside her, her father ahead, trying to clear a path, her youngest sister clinging to her mother's hand, 2 other sisters somewhere in the chaos behind them, lost in the panicked flood of humanity. Everyone was running toward water, the Sumida River, the canals. Any water. The streets, narrow by design, became death traps. Bodies pressed against bodies. People fell. Others trampled them without stopping, without choice. If you stopped, you died. The heat was physical pressure. Yoshiko felt it pushing against her face, her arms, her back. The baby was crying. She couldn't hear the sound over the roar of fire, the screams, the cracking thunder of structures collapsing. Behind them, the fire advanced, not spreading, advancing. A wall of flame, building high, moving faster than anyone could run. Napalm had found the infrastructure. Power lines melted, showering sparks. Gas lines ruptured, creating secondary explosions that scattered more burning debris. The debris landed on people, on clothing, on hair. The gel stuck. Yoshiko saw a woman ahead of her, baby on her back in traditional cloth wrapping. The cloth caught fire. The woman ran, screaming, trying to reach behind herself to tear the baby free. But the napalm had soaked through. Mother and child burned together as they ran. Yoshiko pressed her own baby tighter against her chest and kept moving. 1 a.m., Sumida River. They reached water, thousands of people converging on the river from all directions. The banks were already packed, bodies in the water, swimming, treading, clinging to debris. Yoshiko's father pushed them toward a spot where they could descend. Her mother hesitated. She couldn't swim well. The baby couldn't swim at all. Behind them, the wall of fire grew closer. The air itself seemed to shimmer with heat. Embers the size of fists fell from the sky, burning wooden beams, thatched roofing, parts of structures so consumed by napalm they'd lost all recognizable form. "Into the water!" her father shouted. "Now!" Yoshiko jumped, baby held above her head. The river was cold, shockingly cold after the heat. She surfaced, gasping, trying to keep the baby's face above water. Her youngest sister splashed down beside her, then her father. Her mother stood on the bank, paralyzed by fear. "Mother!" Yoshiko screamed. "Jump!" The flames reached the riverbank. The radiant heat was so intense that buildings on the opposite shore, hundreds of feet away, began smoking, then igniting from thermal radiation alone. Yoshiko's mother's hair caught fire. She didn't jump, didn't scream, just stood there as the flames consumed her from above, her face locked on Yoshiko's eyes, an expression of infinite sadness, infinite apology. Then she collapsed forward, falling but not into the water, into the fire. Yoshiko watched her mother die, held her crying baby, and couldn't do anything but tread water and witness. Without a protective hood, Mother's hair must have caught on fire after I jumped into the river, Yoshiko would say decades later, tears still fresh. She must have died in agony. I cannot hold back my tears whenever I think about it, and cannot forget her sad face looking into my eyes. 1:30 a.m., 5,000 feet above Tokyo, B-29 crewman Richard Bale looked down from his bombardier position. The city below was a sea of flame. The light was so intense he could read papers in his cockpit without a flashlight. The B-29 ahead of him had just dropped its load. Bailey watched the cluster break apart, watched the individual M69s scatter and fall, watched the small explosions as burning napalm scattered across the inferno below, adding drops of gasoline to an ocean of fire. He thought about the people down there. He couldn't help it. Then he pressed the release. His aircraft's 40 cluster bombs fell free. The plane, suddenly 6,000 pounds lighter, leapt upward. Bale felt the change through his feet, through his bones. Behind him, in the firelit darkness, the clusters broke apart. 1,520 more M69s scattered over Tokyo. Each one precisely engineered by Harvard chemists, tested at Dugway, manufactured by Standard Oil Development Company, transported across the Pacific, loaded into a B-29, flown 1,500 miles, and dropped on a city built of wood and paper, each one fulfilling its purpose perfectly. Bale turned away from the window and stared at the instrument panel instead. Numbers, gauges, things that had no screaming civilians in them. Some of the B-29 crews reported experiencing massive updrafts from the heat below, thermals so powerful they tossed the multi-ton aircraft around like toys. Pilots fought for control as superheated air from hundreds of thousands of burning structures pushed their planes upward, sometimes hundreds of feet in seconds. The fire below was so hot it was creating its own weather. 2:37 a.m., all clear. The sirens wailed. The last B-29 had departed. The raid had lasted 2 hours and 29 minutes. In the Sumida River, Yoshiko Hashimoto pulled herself onto the bank. Her baby was alive. Her youngest sister was alive. Her father was alive. Her mother was gone. 2 other sisters were gone. The city around them was gone. 16 square miles of Tokyo, an area equivalent to half of Manhattan, had been reduced to ash and twisted metal. 267,000 buildings destroyed. The fires were still burning, would continue burning for days. The official death toll would be estimated at 100,000. Some historians believe the true number exceeded 120,000. In comparison, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima 5 months later would kill approximately 70,000 to 80,000 people immediately. Nagasaki, approximately 35,000. Operation Meeting House remains the single most lethal air attack in human history, and it was just the beginning. March 11, 1945, the burning continues. March 11, 12, Nagoya, 274 B-29s, M69 incendiaries, 2 square miles destroyed. March 13, 14, Osaka, 274 B-29s, 8 square miles destroyed. March 16, 17, Kobe, 307 B-29s, 3 square miles destroyed. March 18, 19, Nagoya again, 290 B-29s, 3 more square miles. Then the Americans ran out of incendiary bombs. There was a lull. Production ramped up. Factories in the United States worked around the clock manufacturing more M69s, more napalm, more cluster bombs. In Tokyo, survivors wandered through ash fields that had been neighborhoods. Yoshiko Hashimoto moved from relative to relative, anyone who still had shelter. Food was scarce. She fed her baby powdered acorns mixed with water and whatever grain she could find. Her father didn't speak about his wife, about the daughters lost in the chaos. Some traumas were too vast for words. In May, the firebombing resumed. Tokyo was hit again on May 23 to 24. Then May 25 to 26, 464 B-29s this time, targeting what remained of the city. By the end, 50% of Tokyo's total area was destroyed. 4 million people were homeless. Generals Curtis LeMay and Hap Arnold considered the campaign a success. And if you've made it this far, if you want to hear more stories that textbooks skip over, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next, how Japan responded, how the fire changed warfare forever, how one Harvard professor dealt with the legacy of his invention, that's a story for another time. Let's continue. The Reckoning. By August 1945, 64 of Japan's 67 largest cities had been substantially destroyed by incendiary bombing. An estimated 300,000 to 330,000 Japanese civilians were killed by fire raids. 8 million were left homeless. 40% of Japan's urban areas no longer existed. In total, American forces dropped approximately 40,000 tons of M69 incendiary bombs on Japan during World War II. Measured in cost effectiveness, napalm destroyed each Japanese city for approximately $83,000 in development and production expenses. The atomic bomb program cost $2 billion and destroyed 2 cities. By that metric, napalm was 290 times more cost effective than nuclear weapons. By body count metric, napalm killed more Japanese civilians than both atomic bombs combined. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945. The decision was multifactorial: the Soviet Union's entry into the war, the atomic bombings, the successful Allied conventional campaign. But the firebombing had already broken Japan's industrial capacity and civilian morale. Some historians argue the atomic bombs merely formalized a surrender that the fire had already necessitated. General Curtis LeMay, when asked after the war about the morality of firebombing civilians, said, "I suppose if I had lost the war, I would have been tried as a war criminal." He wasn't wrong. June 1972, Boston, Massachusetts. Professor Louis Fieser, 73 years old, sat in his Cambridge home reading the Boston Herald. His career had been distinguished: author of chemistry textbooks, celebrated teacher, emeritus professor at Harvard. Then he read about Vietnam, about napalm, about a photograph that had shocked the world. A 9-year-old girl named Kim Phuc, naked, burned, running from her village as napalm flames consumed the homes behind her. 20 civilians and soldiers maimed in a single strike. By his invention. Fieser felt something he'd avoided for 3 decades. Guilt. He called a journalist, John Lannon, gave an interview. Said something he'd never said publicly. "I couldn't foresee that this stuff was going to be used against babies and Buddhists." Then, revealing the mental gymnastics that had sustained him. The person who makes a rifle, he isn't responsible if it is used to shoot the president. President Lyndon Johnson, when told about Fieser's sudden crisis of conscience, had a different reaction. He called him the crybaby scientist whenever he retold the story. Fieser rewrote his official biography, removed all references to napalm, tried to erase his most famous achievement from his own history. He couldn't. The fire had his name on it. Forever. The weapon's legacy. Napalm became an intrinsic element of American military doctrine for decades. Korea, UN forces dropped approximately twice as much napalm on the peninsula as fell on Japan during WW2. General LeMay estimated the bombing campaign killed 20% of North Korea's population. Vietnam, 352,000 tons of napalm bombs dropped between 1963 and 1973. The weapon became synonymous with American brutality. Protest movements worldwide seized on napalm as the symbol of modern warfare's inhumanity. But America wasn't alone. In 1952, the U.S. Patent Office issued Certificate 2606-107 for incendiary gels and made napalm's formula publicly available. While Julius and Ethel Rosenberg sat on death row for passing atomic secrets, napalm's recipe was published for the world. Countries that subsequently used napalm in warfare: Greece, France, Britain, Portugal, Philippines, South Vietnam, North Vietnam, Cuba, Peru, Bolivia, Brazil, Israel, Egypt, Turkey, India, Iraq, Nigeria, Ethiopia, El Salvador, Argentina, Rhodesia, South Africa. The last confirmed large-scale use by American forces, 2003 invasion of Iraq. In 1980, the United Nations adopted Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. It regulated incendiary weapons, making attacks against concentrations of civilians a war crime. The United States didn't sign it until 2008. Tokyo 2025. The center of the Tokyo raids and war damage stands in Koto Ward, in the heart of the area that burned on March 10, 1945. Founded by Katsumoto Saotomi, a survivor, it preserves documents, literature, and survivor accounts. Few Americans have heard of it. Most Americans don't know about Operation Meeting House at all. Haruyo Nihei, survivor now in her 90s, visits the center regularly. She still remembers the sound of fire like rain, the sight of children burning while they ran. Her father's decision to leave the shelter or be cooked alive, the river of flames flowing down the street. "I don't hate Americans, and I don't hold a grudge," she told an interviewer, "but I do want future generations to know what happened here." "I don't think that most people really understand what happened," she continued. "We want to show that in war, it is the weak and vulnerable, women, the elderly, children, who are too often the victims." Yoshiko Hashimoto, who survived with her baby but lost her mother in the flames, never forgot her mother's face, never forgot the expression of sadness as fire consumed her, never forgot that she was powerless to save her. She lived with that image for 70 years, until her death, until she could finally, perhaps, see her mother again and ask the question that haunted her: "Did you forgive me for surviving?" The question that remains: was it necessary? That's what defenders ask. Would Japan have surrendered without the firebombing, without demonstrating the absolute futility of continued resistance? Probably not. Japan's military culture in 1945 didn't recognize surrender as an option. The invasion of the home islands, Operation Downfall, was projected to cost 500,000 to 1,000 American casualties, millions of Japanese casualties. The firebombing, horrific as it was, might have prevented something worse. But that calculus only works if you abstract the victims into numbers. If you don't see Yoshiko's mother burning on the riverbank, if you don't hear the baby crying on its mother's back as both ignite, if you don't count the 100,000 individual human beings who died in Tokyo alone, each with names, families, dreams, futures that ended in fire. Louis Fieser created napalm on Valentine's Day, 1942, a day supposedly about love, about giving gifts. His gift was a gel that stuck to anything, that burned at 1-800 degrees, that water couldn't extinguish. His gift killed more Japanese civilians than the atomic bomb. Was he a war criminal? A hero who saved American lives? A scientist who made a discovery and lost control of how it was used? The answer depends on whether you're flying at 5,000 feet, dropping bombs on a city you'll never visit, or whether you're standing on a riverbank watching your mother burn, holding a baby you can barely keep alive, wondering if the fire that stuck to everything will finally release its grip. The napalm burned. The cities burned. The people burned. And the fire that couldn't be stopped changed warfare forever, not by making it more powerful, but by making it inescapable, by creating a weapon that violated the fundamental human instinct, that water defeats fire, that there's always a way to extinguish the flames, until there wasn't. That was napalm's true horror, not the fire itself, the fact that the fire couldn't be stopped.